Okay, overnight, generally as a rule, I wake up the middle of the night and can't sleep. So I'll listen to, different YouTube videos here. I like to listen to Why Files, Why Files. Those are pretty good. Sometimes I listen to those. I've listened to most of those. But anyway, there's, Mr. Ballin. Oh, there's a number of them that I'll listen to as I go to sleep. But one of my just recently I found was Don't Scare Claire. Now, Claire, she's in the UK. Most of her stuff is in the UK, but one I listened to last night was an incident that happened here in the United States. Now, I've certainly heard this story quite a number of times before, but I listened to it from Claire last night. It's Eastern Airlines Flight 401. Now, this happened like in 1972. That was a flight from New York to Miami. Now, what had happened, when they would get ready to land, they deployed the landing gear. They only got, the two main, and a green light for the two main landing gear. The nose gear didn't give a green light, and it turned out to be a burned out bulb. The nose gear had fully deployed. The pilot could have sit down on the two main landing gear, leaving the nose in the air till very, very end of the runway, and then sit down. That's one procedure he could have done, and why he didn't do something like that, or just assume that the nose gear might collapse. But what he had done, he'd put it on autopilot, and did a loop around the Everglades. But he accidentally bumped the steering column, which knocked it out of autopilot, and eventually crashed into the Everglades. Ended up killing the co-pilot, the flight engineer. Well, I think a couple of them had actually survived the crash, but died in the hospital a few days later. There was a handful of those. There was about 30 or 40 people that walked away with either broken bones or minor scrapes, but there was 160-some people on board that most of them had died. They had died in the initial crash, or maybe some of them drowned. But there was a guy on an airboat that had rescued a handful of them. He was out there hunting frogs. But anyway, they had... now, this is a common practice back at the time. They would, salvage equipment. They salvaged aircraft. It landed in shallow water. They salvaged some of the equipment, radio, microwave from the galley, different pieces of navigation equipment. And most of them they used on another particular aircraft. These stories are all out there. You can find these stories. Be typed like the ghost of Eastern 401. But anyway, the pilot had shown up. He appeared to either passengers that wouldn't have known who he was, or actually the number of the other flight crews, captains, stewardess. Stewardess is not a proper term. I forget stewardess. And forgive me, I forget flight attendant. But anyway, the other flight attendants had had worked with the pilot, had known who he was, and actually recognized him. Mainly on this one aircraft. It's an L-1011, Lockheed L-1011. I believe. If I'm wrong, correct me. But anyway, a number of them, but of course, higher ups on for Eastern Islands really didn't want it to get out there that their aircraft were haunted, because a lot of people would not want to bump into the ghost of the flight crew. I think there was like 10 flight attendants on that one that crashed. I think 2 of them actually died, and some of them may have actually been spotted. Now, though, they had reused a microwave oven off that plane on that other plane. They don't do that anymore. I'm going to give you the reasons here in a couple of minutes. Now, I think it was a flight engineer. The one flight attendant had opened the microwave. She saw the face of the flight engineer in the microwave. Now that would be spooky. But anyway, he kept saying. He kept telling her, he said, beware fire on this aircraft. She closed it. She went and got another flight attendant. They opened up. Sure enough, the flight engineer was on there. Was in there speaking to him. And they got. I think the co-pilot went down there to the galley. Same thing he saw. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. But anyway, he saw the face in the microwave oven, inside the microwave oven, which would be really weird to see. But anyway, this flight engineer is going, beware fire on this aircraft. Now, what happened? Now, that L-1011's got 3 engines, two on the very tail, 2 on the horizontal stabilizer, and then 1 in the tail fin. I believe that's right, but I may be wrong. I believe it's got, but the top engine had caught fire. So what they did, just the pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer was going to fly it back to a maintenance facility, and then one of the other engines caught fire. With no passenger, just a flight crew on there. So they made emergency landing and set it down. So that flight engineer was right. I mean, it didn't hurt anybody, but he did warn them about it. Let's see. Oh, the reason they don't use equipment anymore, salvage equipment. Now, there has been a handful of. Let's say they did use a microwave oven on another plane that crashed. Now there would be a liability problem, even though it had nothing to do with the problem. There would still be lawsuits and stuff over. Then the salvage companies really didn't want to get into stuff like that, so they stopped doing it. That's the reason they don't reuse equipment like that anymore. Now there may be civilian aircraft that like a radio or something, piece of navigation equipment. I'm not sure how big a compatibility issue there would be between the navigation equipment or radios, between different aircraft. I guess I'm thinking some stuff would work, some stuff wouldn't. You might use it on a little bit lighter aircraft, or maybe a corporate jet, something like that, where it's more likely to not be as big an issue. But if you search here on YouTube, Ghost of Flight 401, Eastern 401, there's some of the most fascinating stories. If you're a hardcore skeptic and hadn't believed in ghosts before, I mean, if you take the word, of a pilot or co-pilot that's seeing, one of their colleagues actually seeing them, actually talking to them, they're willing to risk their career on, coming out and saying they saw a ghost of a former, of a colleague that they knew that they had lost. I find that very, very interesting. Like I said, if you didn't believe in ghosts before, that might make you believe in ghosts. That might. I'm just curious. I've asked this question a number of times. Let's say a hardcore skeptic, don't believe that we were sold, don't believe we have an afterlife, and you get the report of someone that's willing to risk their career on on reporting that they've seen a ghost of a colleague. I'm just curious if anybody is convinced that in ghosts. Okay, love y'all. Let's keep life. Let's all stay spooky out there. Bye bye. Love y'all.